Hi, this is Nancy Shanto, and I'm here to talk with you today about self-attachment. Self-attachment is something that is an extension of attachment theory. Attachment theory was founded by John Bowlby, and he was really studying children and how children relate with primary caregivers. And what they learned in attachment theory is that children who are securely attached are able to both give and receive love and feel connected, and then differentiate and go off and be independent without fear of the departure and return of the caregiver. Um, they're basically relating with the world from a position of trust. And when we get, as children, when we get some sort of interruption in our formation of secure attachment, we'll end up with some variation of anxious attachment styles, avoidant attachment styles, and disorganized attachment styles, which is basically a combination of anxious and avoidant. So, in anxious attachment styles, we're trying to hold on to the caregiver, and in avoidant attachment styles, we're distancing from the caregiver. And in anxious, avoidant, disorganized attachment styles, we are doing both, clinging and also avoiding um, the caregiver. How does this translate to self attachment? Well, as adults, we're not relating with primary caregivers anymore, we're relating with other human beings. And how we related to primary attachment caregivers can affect our ability to relate with ourselves. And what we want to do as adults is start to build the kind of self relationship that produces secure attachment, which means that we have a relationship with ourselves where there's a couple of things that are really important. One is that we're present with our experience and responding with what they call a contingent response, which is a response that's based on what's happening. So if a baby cries, you pick the baby up and comfort the baby and try and figure out what's making the baby cry and then change that. So a wet diaper, or the baby's hungry, or some other, there's a loud noise, whatever it is that the baby needs that the caregiver is providing. And as adults, even though we're not necessarily getting dirty diapers, hopefully, we are actually having experiences, and some sort of contingent response to our experiences coming from ourselves is really important. When we are regularly responding to ourselves with a contingent response, we start to build something called attunement. Attunement is this harmonious sense of empathetic alignment, connection with ourselves and our experience coming from. And we would think about this in Skills for Change as being that self attachment is coming from the wise adult consciousness, the part of ourselves that observes us. In brain science, they're talking about the prefrontal medial cortex as being the location of self-observation. That brain function happens in that part of the brain. So this part of the brain, this part of our consciousness that is self-observing, that's the part of us that we want to provide contingent responses from. And then so that we can be attuned with ourselves. And then the other thing is that in secure attachment, the caregiver is initiating contact that is not being demanded. So in addition to the child crying and the caregiver responding with an appropriate response, the child also wants the caregiver to initiate play that the child didn't demand. So we, as wise adult consciousness inside of ourselves as self-attached people, need to generate interest in ourselves, attention to ourselves, engagement with ourselves that isn't just something based on an aversive experience, something that needs to be fixed, but is also based on creating good experiences. What do we want to feel? What do we want to do? What do we want to enjoy? And that this present consciousness is choosing something to do that is playful or enjoyable and then present to that experience. So those two pieces are both really important. We also need to, um, if something's happening, we need to stay present to ourselves. And often, what I see happen in my practice, even though people think they are being self-loving of themselves, if something happens and we are blaming ourselves, holding ourselves accountable over responsibly, it can turn into a kind of self-abandonment where we're not being with ourselves in our experience, but we're kind of trying to fix ourselves in order to fix our experience of other people or the world. And that doesn't produce secure attachment internally. That produces a sense of disconnection and abandonment internally. So we need to forgive ourselves, be compassionate with ourselves, show up for ourselves in a way that is acknowledging of the ways in which we're powerless in the world, powerless over even ourselves, but especially powerless over other people and their choices and their stories and circumstances that are happening outside of us. And when I say accepting our powerlessness, we don't have control over those things. We do have the power to respond. And if we are spending all of our time trying to fix ourselves to try and control the outside world, we're not generating the response that is available to us, which is an energized choice. And when I say energized, what I mean is that if we're not spending all of our energy trying to fix things, then we do have that energy available to us to attend to ourselves and make a choice. What is it that we want? What is it that we need to do to take care of ourselves? What is it that we need to do in order to take care of our human homework? And what life design do we want? What's 100% of what we want? So I hope that this conversation about self-attachment is helpful. I wanted to talk about it in the context of this question of belonging and being good enough and how we can address those feelings inside of ourselves. So I hope you're finding this helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. And I look forward to talking with you again soon.